Yeah, in meditation, everything comes up. Meditation isn't an exercise in trying not to think or anything like that. One of the key principles of meditation is don't look for results. Don't try to do anything, because you're just going to hold yourself in bondage if you do. Don't expect anything. Now, if you've got a mantra, listen to your mantra. If you're doing something else, do that something else. And just lose all interest in results or going anywhere or achieving anything. It's like getting into a hot bath at the end of the day. Just sink into the hot water. See how simple it is, isn't it? Just rest. Just here, isn't it? But dear, don't let me give you the impression it's taken me a lifetime to be able to speak with the simplicity and confidence I do now. I've struggled through all these things, yes. All the curiosities and the desires and human afflictions. As I'm older than most of you, it seems all I can say to you is just struggle on, my dears, keep going. Do you know what was written about Jesus in the book of Isaiah? A man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Truly he hath borne our afflictions. So what happens when you open up like this? Well, truly it gets very big, doesn't it? And yet, does the whole human situation disappear? Is it, as some people say, just an illusion, just a dream of no consequence? Well, in one sense, sometimes it may appear like that. But what about those other words of Jesus? Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Why did Jesus come into the world? Why was he crucified? If it was all just illusion, why did he suffer? Some of you may know I spent several years in Russia, and I learnt a lot out there. So I've tried to relate in my book on Russia there. And one of the things that Russians commonly say when you ask them about why they have such a hard life and why so many truly dreadful things have happened there of which we have little knowledge in the West. Jesus suffered, they say, and so should we. Simple logic, isn't it? And what about this word that those of you that have dipped into Buddhism will know all about? Compassion. Why do you come here and sit with me? Why can't I just sail away to the stars and leave you all behind? With God, all things are possible. But you know how it is when you see a wounded bird or a dog or a person that's in some sort of trouble. It's a human instinct to try to offer some comfort, isn't it? To share the trouble. It's natural. It's not your trouble, but you don't really think about that at the moment, do you? A crying child or something. So, do I suffer? I've got my own aches and pains, but they don't seem of much consequence, really, compared to the bigger picture. But they're there. We have to, what we can't change, we must endure and put up with them. And but thank God, when you start thinking about other people, usually your own troubles diminish, don't they? And you begin to think more of others. Now look, we've all got an ego, dear. So there's no use punishing yourself over the fact that you've got an ego. So have I. Everybody's got an ego. We talk a lot of nonsense about pretending we haven't sometimes, but of course we have. We're all totally self-centered, interested in ourselves, not really interested in anybody else. That's the nature of the ego. And the ego is obsessed with figuring out or trying to create a just self-justification. There's no need to criticize the ego or say horrid things about it. The ego is just a fact of our human existence. That's why you and I are here, because the ego has brought us into separate existence, and the flesh is the consequence of the ego. And we're all going to die, that's a fact. And the wages of sin, which is what the ego is death. And anybody who's in a mortal body and pretends he hasn't got an ego is deluding himself. So let's all accept the fact that we've all got egos and not worry about it. But thank God, if we just use our common sense and just come into the present and come back to this blessed state of oneness, and let it just expand a little bit, what happens is that the predominance of the ego just gets less, and that gets bigger. The balance changes. You still got the ego. Think of the icon or the picture of St. George and the Dragon. I'm sure you've all seen that. Do you know what I'm talking about? Well, it's one of the traditional religious pictures of this saint on a white horse with overriding a dragon on the ground. You see, as always, there was a girl involved in it. This dragon had taken this beautiful girl, and of course, the hero St. George came to rescue her. That is the story. But anyway, if you look carefully at a good representation of this icon, well, a typical Western representation of this icon shows the muscular saint with a weapon of war, slaying this poor dragon, and blood all over the place, you see. And this hero, this great conquering hero, rides on triumphant. But a proper icon representation of it, just as you get in Russia. Sorry, I'm referring a lot to Russia, but she's taught me a lot in life. St. George, his face is completely calm. He's not engaging in conflict with this dark dragon at all. His face is completely serene, and there's God up in the cloud looking down. So there's this connection with God, which is this presence that we're talking about. And his arm is raised in a gesture of rest, and the spear isn't a bloody weapon, it's a shaft of light, a shaft of consciousness. So there's no blood at all. And he just recognizes this monster, this dark monster, as just a dark monster, a shadow. Life the other way around, in other words, like that, you see? Look at the palm of my hand, there's light and there's dark. There's the ego, the dragon, and there's light. Now we don't go around getting upset about shadows, do we? They're part of the structure of life, so why get upset about the ego? It's only a shadow, you see? And all you've got to do is just recognize the shadow as a shadow and look at the light. That's how evil is overcome. Because evil is live, L-I-V-E, spelt the wrong way round, isn't it? Evil is life, just the wrong way round. All you've got to do is just recognize it. You see, coming back to this question, how are you? Well, you see, in human understanding, that refers to the shadow, doesn't it? The unreal part of me. Because in the light, the question has no meaning, really. Because the light is light, isn't it? You don't say to the light, how are you? Do you? Or to the sun, how are you this morning? Fear not the ego, my dears. Fear not. This totally dominates us, dear. We don't know anything better. The whole world is governed by the ego. Everybody. Our leaders, politics, everything is ego. It's all me and my separate ideas. The moment you get into the world of you and me, I'm right and you're wrong, that's all ego. Everything that is what you call duality. Two of us. My thoughts, my feelings, my unhappiness, my suffering. It's all just ego, dear. And you know, how do you deal with light? Darkness, you just switch on the light. So all you do is just turn to the light, and then gradually the darkness sorts itself out. And if you try to sort it out, all you're doing is out of the frying pan into the fire. You don't know what to do about it. Neither do I. God knows. Just let the light shine. How do you get rid of the night? The sun rises. How do you get rid of the nightmare? You just wake up next morning. By breakfast, you've forgotten about it. If you go to a psychologist and you spend a huge amount of money having your ego sorted out, dear, will you be any better off? No. It's just observe it for yourself here and now. Whatever we give attention to will expand, won't it? Now that I'm older, I find much comfort in just not knowing. You know, so I suppose I mentioned humility. It's part of being humble. I think that life often throws up these questions, these problems, you know, particularly in our own minds and bodies, and you're really at your wit's end how to deal with it, and you don't know. And you know, you go to experts; they've all got an answer. And but yes, I find great comfort in not knowing and just accepting that I don't know. And I think it's very, very helpful, because in this business of submitting yourself to what I like to call higher authority, which is this process of letting go, really, you just acceptance. You just got to accept this human condition, because none of us really know, do we, what to do? What is it? Why is the world as it is? Which way to vote next week? Most of us don't really know, do we? In our heart of hearts. Even what to have for lunch? Half of us don't know, do we? Well, again, our human mind tries to figure these things out, but we don't know. But in retrospect, perhaps it's easier to see that. Well, again, I use this sweet word. If it humbles us, then it's served a purpose, hasn't it? Because the humbling is always, it's taking away that self-surety of the ego, isn't it? Then just being present brings peace to peace, doesn't it? Mm. In that peace, all this hubbub of the world is contained, isn't it? It's not got rid of, it's contained, isn't it? Just like you would embrace someone and you don't worry about their warts and all, do you? You just embrace them. You don't worry about what bad thoughts they had yesterday or whether they've got an ego or not. You just embrace them. You don't enter meditation like a battlefield in the way we're brought up in this world to fight evil, or what we call evil. But Jesus specifically tells us, resist not evil. Now that's totally contradictory, isn't it, to the way we're brought up in this world. So we have to begin to learn. Those of us that set our foot on this ladder of spiritual work begin to see that the real world is that way. It's the other way around. Everything's topsy-turvy. Yeah. Because there's darkness, there's light. You don't actually have to do anything about it except the Bible tells us to repent, which means us turning that way around, to face the light and not the dark. And that's what meditation is. Meditation is simply that. It's letting go, which has the same effect. But, my dear, it takes a lifetime to learn this because we're so thick, we're so conditioned in our heads, you just can't take it on board. You may nod your head kindly at what I say, but in your heart of hearts you don't believe it. Or you may believe it for a moment, but next moment you'll be back in. It's like elastic, pulling you back into your habitual thinking. And if I say it 100 times, you'll still forget it 5 minutes later. And this is how we are. And it's a lifetime's work, dear. I started to meditate when I was 26 years old. And you can guess how old I am now. And I'm still learning, dear. I'm still fighting things. And when I meditate, I also have these thoughts. I spend half my time thinking also. Well, not always, but quite often I do. Sometimes the whole time something's bothering me. And you just got to accept that this is our human condition. And it's very good because, again, it will humble you to realize that you're just in the same mess as everybody else. And you can't get rid of these things. You shouldn't try to, because you won't. The more you try to enter into battle with them, the bigger they get. So all you can do is just use, if you've got a good method of meditation, a mantra or something. Do you have a mantra? You have a mantra? Well, just turn that, and then each time you repeat your mantra, if you give your attention, you see, to that, you immediately have less attention for anything else. That's how it works, doesn't it? Once we start thinking of biscuits, we forget about something else, don't you? Most people couldn't sit still for 5 minutes, let alone an hour and a half. That in itself is quite an achievement. To be encouraged, all of you, that you can actually sit there for... If you get a glimpse of something, of peace or something in meditation, well, be grateful. But if you don't worry, just sit down next time. And one day when you're not expecting it, you might be surprised. That's how it works. You can't commandeer these things. Absolutely not. I don't like any of these words, should or ought or any of this, because it doesn't work. All it does is lead you to disappointment, because you can't. Anyway, that's aggression, and the spiritual way is not aggressive. It's totally let go. So allow. The moment you start saying, I ought to do this, I ought to be able to conquer my ego, I ought to be attentive all day long, this is the road to ruin, because you won't succeed. You'll be disappointed. So just accept what is. Keep your feet on the ground if you can. You forget to do that most of the time, but if you do remember once a day, you're doing fine. And each time you find this rest, this peace, gradually it's like a balance in your mind, you see. Here's you struggling with the world, you should and ought and all that, trying to sort yourself out. And here is this blessed letting go. Now then, to begin with, you let go for a moment and whoosh, down goes the weight again. But so you've got to practice for as long as I have, dear. I've been practicing nearly 60 years. I'm still learning. And each time you do this, it's like you're putting another little weight on that side of the balance. And gradually, the more you do it, over many years, you'll find that you do more of that and less of this. You know, good thinking you can go on half a dozen retreats and you become enlightened. Yeah? Well, you're a better man than me if you can. You're in for the long haul, my dear, and you're just at the beginning. It seems to be now, looking back, very clear that this presence is essentially love. It is infinitely kind and compassionate and understanding of our human situation. And as it said, we are saved by grace. There is a consciousness that understands us much better than we understand ourselves. We say, don't we, God knows, and I don't. And we are cared for and we are guided. And every step along the way is under conscious guidance. Although we don't understand it, we may not accept it. But there is higher authority that governs every blade of grass and every insect and every faintest little change in the clouds in the sky and every hair that grows on the heads of you and me and every thought in our heads, you know. And that's the perfection we seek for. So that it doesn't seem that way, because I think I know better. We are being led through exactly what we need, hour by hour and day by day, for our ultimate perfection. How could I say that if I didn't know it? Really, we've only just got to sit here, open, listen to that miracle of a car passing along the road and that rise and fall of sound. And just hear the creaking of the sofa when a body moves, how miraculously it is under law, isn't it? It's lawful. What made that sound of the creaking? Or the sort of, the sort of hoarseness in my voice, or the look in your eyes, the way our hands are moving, the ebb and flow of our attention. It's miraculous, isn't it? A continuous unfolding, miraculous perfection of life exactly as it is. How could one possibly do anything to make it better? Now you'll find that you'll start questioning this, and probably you already are questioning it. But, you'll say, just observe it, my dears, because you see, we can't stay in this blessed state for very long. We will get pulled back down into our habitual conditioning and seek relief in tea or coffee or something, biscuits. Because this is the way we are given moments of this realization, just moments, because if we lived there all the time, we'd just explode, wouldn't we? We just But we've got our 80 years of life to struggle on in this world for a purpose. So we can't opt out of it too soon. We have to live this life. But we're given these moments of grace, you see, like windows of realization to help us, to guide us on the way, like street lamps along the road, with darkness in between and another light. And these lights, these moments of realization will gradually become more numerous as we practice. That's why practice is important. And that's really all I've done in my life, dear. I just kept plodding on with daily practice, twice a day. And now I find myself in the blessed position of helping other people. Well, when I was 26, I went to a school of meditation. I was given a discipline. Well, it wasn't difficult, dear, because I loved it. When the moment I learned to meditate, I loved it straight away. So it wasn't difficult for me. But I'd been brought up as I was, the way I was brought up, life was more disciplined. At school, I was expected to do what I was told. It wasn't like it is now. Life was more disciplined. So it's not difficult for me, and I've stuck to it throughout my life, because through the bad periods of my life, it was a lifeline for me. I've been through some terrible times in my life, and meditation has really been one of the few things I could hang on to some of my darkest periods. But I assure you, I haven't always been given these insights. You get them, most of one's life, it's like on a cloudy day, it's overcast, there's no light, you just struggle on, and discipline helps you keep going during these dark times, and then now and again there's a little break in the cloud and you get a glimpse of something to encourage you. So discipline is very important. It's been affirmed by generations of people that have taken this path. Discipline. It's the nature of faith, isn't it? You don't really know, you can't explain it, you just, funny, just as it was for us a minute or two ago. What was it that was able to receive that? It wasn't really a knowing process, it wasn't an intellectual thing, was it? Yet it was deeply received, wasn't it? Look, here's physical, here's the body. And then we have the mind, what we call the mind, the thinking part, the bit you go to school for, the facts, the encyclopedia of your head, all this lot. But see, that's only a level of knowledge. The body, instinctive knowledge, discursive knowledge, but higher knowledge, you see. There are levels of consciousness, of everything. From the invisible to the visible, from matter to spirit. And what the world calls knowledge is just a layer, just a level of knowledge, like that. From what we call ignorance to whatever you call. But there's a higher knowledge. Higher knowledge is not the same as worldly knowledge. Higher knowledge is actually faith. That's what we call faith. You can't explain it. But something very deep inside you knows it and acknowledges it. Probably if I asked you, diligently, just why have you come here today? There might be a bit of faith in it. Something you couldn't quite explain. You saw this bloke on the video. Something seemed to connect. Hard to explain, isn't it? Well, the school where I was taught referred to it as the work with a capital W, And at that time, I was a young farmer. I was very much concerned with what worldly work, this sort of work. But gradually, when school first introduced this, put the work first, as they'd say, I thought of my farm, and I wasn't too sure of that. But gradually, as the years have passed, it's become ever more clear to me that this really is the work, the real work. And what the world calls work is really more the performance in name and form, you see. This is the nature of worldly work. It's moving things from one place to another, isn't it? Laying out the plates and making the coffee. That's what the world calls work. But the real work is this way, letting in the light. And then this work may become enlightened by the light. So the two work together. But if this work comes first, then it excludes the light. You're not. Then you just get a mechanical, robotic sort of effect. Mass production. Why are we in this mess? Well, indeed, dear, why? Well, how should I know? At school, I was introduced to the Bible, and I've never been very good at religion, and I don't like to call myself a particularly religious man, but I find I do refer to the Bible to help me answer a lot of these questions, because I know it quite well, and it does contain a lot of stories and explanations of things that are very useful. Of course, your question refers to what's called the fall from paradise. Well, what happened? Adam was tempted. He was offered an apple by his wife, and he took it, and against the commandment of God that you shouldn't do this. Well, think of a little baby in a pram, dear. The mother offers it a lollipop or something. What does he do with it? I want it. Oh, I don't want that one, I want that one. You've seen it all. You see, look at what my hand is doing. It's the opposite of that, isn't it? Do you want it, the mother will say. Do you like it? Which one do you like? And so the baby is trained to do that and that, isn't it? And so we are brought, that's what's called being brought up into this world. I'm John, you're Kieran. We're different, aren't we? Well, there you are, and say that's the answer. So we fall from that blessed condition that we were all in 5 minutes ago, get into this separate existence. This has been happening, as the Bible tells us, since the beginning. We fell from paradise into separate existence. And so we have to work to maintain our separate existence. Work in the worldly sense of the meaning, in the sweat of our brow shalt thou labour. That's why. Because when we do in this, there's no more work to do. It's perfect, isn't it? Paradise is still there. It hasn't gone away. It's just that we are not aware of it. And not only have we fallen, but see, we look downwards, don't we? Our whole focus is on this. Every other word we say is I or me or mine, which are the labels of the ego. Which of you can talk for 5 minutes without saying I or me or mine? It's just we're totally ingrained in it. Do you understand what I say when I say I, me or mine are the labels of the ego? Whenever you hear yourself say I, me or mine, that's your ego. And of course everybody else talking like that. I think. And that's why the real work? Well, because most of us are discontent, unhappy to some extent, and so you look for something better. Some of you may think that spiritual work may offer some help. Why have you all come here today? Thinking you may find some help, something better. Why do we meditate? Yes, the original reason may get lost somewhere, we may forget really what it's all about, but then we're back in the pit of misery again and maybe reminded. Isn't that life, you see?
Yeah.
Look how the consciousness of this last couple of hours has just gone up and down all the time, doesn't it? It does, doesn't it? This is the nature of life, doesn't it? God puts things up and down. This is how it is. This is nature. And you see, you cannot maintain this high state of consciousness, not in our present state anyway, because we just go up and down like a yo-yo all the time. You remember and you forget. Remember, forget throughout the day. You're happy, you're sad. It's how the day goes, isn't it? From better to worse. That's life. I like very much another phrase from the Bible: with God all things are possible. We never know what the weather's going to be one day to the next, and this, I think all our attempts to govern the human condition are questionable. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I think particularly on the question of pain is a good example, really, that people have been struggling how to deal with pain since the beginning of time, haven't they? They still are. Well, that's the help, isn't it? If one can stop complaining about it, at least to other people. You can you may complain to yourself, but yes, some people, they do rather impose their pain on everybody else, don't they? I also used to sit cross-legged, Alistair, for many years I did, overcoming much pain as a young man. I forced my poor old legs into the lotus position and absolutely loved it. And for many, many years I would sit like that. I thought I was a tip-top meditator. I knew what to do, doing it like the professionals did. But whether that damaged my knees and led to problems with arthritis, I don't know. but anyway, time came when my knees began to pain me more, and that's why I have to sit in a chair now. They don't bend like they used to. Still, it gave me a few good years. So I know about pain in the knees. I know a lot about knee pain. The one thing I was taught in the school of meditation was to meditate with a straight back. That was considered important. But ultimately, it's coming back to paradise again. You see, in our moments of uplift, you realize there is a world with no more pain, no more suffering. The real world that is the nature of it. It is a fact. It's true. It's for real. That we have fallen away from. We're not at home. We're in this sort of exile now, of absence from the presence of God. And this is really the cause of all our pain, physical, emotional, and everything else, is that we're not at home. We've lost our love. why we're forever searching for love, for comfort of one form or another, and finding it little bits sometimes in this world, but ultimately in this world it all comes to pass. It's only by going home, finally, that the heart is at home and at rest, complete.